And so, hello again, guys. Welcome back. We have another deck tech here. Even though we know that standard might be full of the BB decks, we still try to explore decks of some tribal setup. And one of which is this one, which a bit kind of already themed like that of Tarkir Dragonstorm, but we still giving this go with some updates from the new set Edge of Eternities. So we took this one as we called them Timur or RGU Dragons. This is basically a ramp deck that relies in late game action with good triggers from Terror of the Peaks. And now we are going to explore what EOE or Edge of Eternities has to offer for this kind of deck build. So a quick rundown of the lineup. We have one artifact, the lone common from Tarkir Dragonstorm Globe, which buffs your dragons. Creatures are 24, 5 enchantments, including the late game action of this deck, Dragonback Assault. 24 lands with the splash of blue basically. 2 planeswalkers in the form of Ugin, Storm, which of course, who else any dragon deck ramp would have in the late game except for Ugin. And for sorcery, which basically become an instant as long as you behold a dragon for casting it. And a little sideboard right down here after we discuss the main deck. So let's take a look at the choices. Of course, this is one of the goal of this deck to ramp, and we have also a benefit for having dragons as its tribal, which makes those dragons enter with an additional +1 counter on it. And for the creatures, we have the rundown, of course, Llanowar Elves as our main 1-mana ramp for this deck. We make sure that we can have like a turn 3 Trailblazer or a turn 3 Bloomvine Regent Omen or Claim Territory, and make sure also we can consider also a turn 4 Terror of the Peaks. So what other ramp would be preferred here is in the form of these 2-drops, which is we have considered Ruby Daring Tracker from Miles of Drain. So this version goes that you can add 1 red or 1 green. It has haste, but the benefit here is that whenever it attacks, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it becomes +2/+2, which basically becomes a 3/4 attacker, which also gets to for you from extra damage with this creature. But its early role mainly is because of ramping up to your dragon spells. Another 2-drop here is Sarkhan Dragon Ascendant, which I think would still going to need to shine in this deck. Is you behold the dragon to create a treasure token, which is basically an artifact ramp for this deck. So whenever a dragon you control enters, puts up some counter on Sarkhan, and then it becomes a dragon with flying, which can basically jump up some early damage to your opponents. And for the 3-drops, which is basically a plot effect, you can go with casting a mana ramp or mana elf turn 1 and then plot it into turn 2. Its benefit there is that whenever it's plot and then it became free later on, it enters the battlefield to add 1 mana of any color, basically a good fix for this deck. And then whenever another creature with power 4 greater enters under the control, draw a card. So basically, having this one, you have Nomadic Hellkites, Terror of the Peaks, and Bloomvine as your creatures with power 4 or greater, and later on, the Dragonback Assault will also generate this kind of card advantage. So make sure that you can curve early on, so we hope that starting with the 1-mana Llanowar Elves, we make this deck as consistent as possible. In the 4-drops, we have some variants here, basically 2 kinds of 4-mana creatures. First off, Nomadic Hellkite, which in turn can destroy an basic land or opponent controls. Maybe if they are 3-color or something, or they have a mana land, you can basically destroy it and have them search for a basic land, but its drawback is that it enters a tap with a stun counter on it. So basically dealing them for 1 mana for a turn, but basically also having a 4/5 flyer for this deck, which also benefits with the tribal dragons and make it a 5/6 with this globe in the battlefield. What also makes this good is the other creature from Edge of Eternities, Starfield Vocalist. So this creature has this ability that whenever opponent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So basically adding for this kind of trigger, entering the battlefield for Nomadic Hellkite gets 2 triggers, triggering also with Terror of the Peaks gets another additional trigger for each of those creatures entering. So basically, this can also be good because you can warp it for 2 and cast it later on for its full mana cost, therefore making it a more efficient curve if you basically have a lot of mana to work with by casting warp and casting your Terror of the Peaks, for example, and other creatures with these ETB effects. And for the 5-drop is particularly this one. Bloom Vibrant is basically like a cultivate effect, but later on, if you're able to cast this, so this creatures enters, you gain 3 life, or another dragon you control enters, gaining you another 3 life. Basically, having a 4/5 flyer will also being a good in the late game with sustainability of having to late gain against, especially against the aggro matchups. And of course, the good curve of this deck is Terror of the Peaks, and also having them to pay 3 life if they want to target this with a spell. Only that the drawback is this only spell, not abilities, but therefore we can still have a decent 5/4 flyer, which also gets you this trigger to deal damage equal to the creature's power that enters to any target. Basically, you can target opponent's creature, you can target his or her life total, or his or her planeswalker if needed in certain situations. So that is your 24 land, 24 creatures for this deck. For enchantments, we considered aside from Dragon Assault, which is also our main, one of our main late game win condition in this deck, we have also copies of Breaching Dragonstorm. So this enchantment goes also with the dragon theme, because whenever dragon enters, you can return this to its owner's hand and have another effect. More, we have Starfield Vocalist in the battlefield. This trigger ETB triggers an additional time. And when this does, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an unlocked card, and then casting it if spells mana value or 8 or less for free. So with that, 2 copies in the deck would also have a ramp effect in Roaching Dragonstorm, which can search for 2 basic lands, up to 2, and then shuffle them. And of course, whenever dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. So that is your enchantment for this deck. Before we go through to the land choices, we still, of course, to need to explain these other card types. But of course, Ugin of the Storm is basically a very obvious late game win kind of situation, because casting also this one will get you another good spot removal effect, exiling a target permanent that's 1 or more colors, and also get you a late game card draw and gain life, and also can help ramp up with adding 3 colorless mana. Or this one, this -11 would not be really fit for this deck because it goes with the color theme. But anywho, this deck would also not really rely on that many dragons, but of course you need the ramp to make sure that you can cast them as early as possible. And of course, again, multi-deck sale as your basically main deck spot removal for creatures and planeswalkers, dealing 4 damage to them and making it instant if you behold a dragon as to cast it. And for the lands, we have basically red and green. So considering Stomping Ground, the reprint has been added for 4 copies of this in the deck. We have considered also 3 Tonspire Verge, and a Commercial District for the mana fix, and also Surveil for this free value. And also Hedge Maze, since we're Splashing Blue, we need also this blue-green dual, as well as the Willow Rush Verge as your fix for Splashing Blue. And later on I will explain some green blue sideboards that are also essential why we have this kind of mana fix for this deck. For as long as we go with the basics, we know that this ramp, for example, we need to search basic lands, and this one we need to search basic forest. We have 5 forests in the deck for this build, 1 island and 5 mountains for the other, for the red access. And lastly, we have Mercy of the Spirit Dragon. It's also a good mana fix for this deck because you can add mana of any color to cast a dragon spell or an omen spell, and later on you can pay for to sacrifice this land, search the library for a dragon card, and put it in. So that is the main deck for this lineup of our Timur deck. Let's take a look now as the sideboard choices. I based this from the recent MTG online tournaments and maybe also in MTG Arena for some of these decks that uses the Timur mid-range that was popularized in the recent Arena Championships. So we are also kind of duplicating some of the common and maybe the efficient sideboards for this deck. So let's take a look again with the grid view we have first is 2 copies of Fire Magic. We know that Black White or the Orzhov tokens is now kind of popular now in the metagame, so you need early maybe a way to sweep them early on. So we have Fire Magic to maybe deal 2 damage to each creature as a way for stopping their initial board, and also just partner it with the graveyard removal so that your uh, uh, trigger of the returning them back to the battlefield will now be possible for their gameplay. In addition to that, so creature control early on would also be very important. So we have 2 copies of Torch the Tower to make sure that any of the early creatures, especially for maybe for the mono red or the mono green matchup, would be dealt with by this instant burn spell. In addition to that, I've considered also Scorching Shot, which is a 2 mana cost 5 damage to a creature, which we have still have many access for red mana, which makes sure that this 2 red is not a drawback for this deck. Now for specific matchups, particularly let's say the matchup against the Azorius Synthesizer, we have a specific card here from Age of Eternities which answers their board. You can choose exile artifacts with mana value 3 or less. So you notice that most of their cards and the artifacts are 3 mana, and I think they have basically just 1 or 2 mana, 1 or 2 4 mana and above artifact in the lineup. So we need this to make sure that they're early, or maybe if they're able to set up their synthesizer, you will be able to wipe them up with this 1 sorcery. And to back up this, we have maybe Negate to counter their Perilous Snares, their Purposing Base, and also this would be efficient against the Azorius control to make sure that your spells resolve or your dragons resolve by having an extra mana to back up and counter their counter spells. So we have a few variants of this deck. I have also considered several one-offs here, such as the Binder. There are instances that you can need this one. We're also having a 3/2 creature that can beat down. For example, if we have going to be a matchup against another mid-range with less creatures, and maybe against even for control decks, you can also sideboard this against them as a way to surprise them to have a threat early on, and maybe counter some effects such as maybe Banishing Light effect. You can counter this with this ETB effect of the Binder. And the other one-offs here, we have Heritage Reclamation, which is another good disenchant spell, and also can exile cards from a graveyard, which also a backup for this other card here, Ghost Vacuum, which also goes against the VV decks, against the Reanimators, and even other graveyard shenanigans in the metagame. So these are 2 main efficient sideboard against them, because this is also very good because it also be able to destroy artifact enchantments and even be able to efficient against the synthesizer decks. And also this uncommon from Murders of Khal Manor, we have the Cease and Desist. Both halves of this deck of these cards is basically very efficient. Like for example, Cease can exile cards from graveyard, and then you can also draw a card, a replacement, and gain 2 life. And also in the late game, you can destroy artifact enchantments, which is also good against maybe the Azorius Synthesizer decks, which is also frequent in the metagame. So with this kind of setup, we know that we can have various lineups and the possible options that we can consider once that the sideboarding part of games. And do take note that sideboarded games are basically 2 games out of 3, just in case that we will be able to you lose your first game, you will still have the second game and third game to cover up us to the backup of the matchup. And so let's take a look finally for the next stats. Basically, we have red and green, as blue as mentioned earlier. 28 pips for red, green is 20 only. The production would still be kind of the green, but it's kind of important here for this kind of setup, because we need to consider that we need to have a turn 1 Nano Elves as possible. So this is basically a green card. So we make sure that at least that play would make this deck more consistent, and maybe later on just ramp up to access your mountains to make sure that the red costing will be accessible in the late game. And average value is 3.64. We have a few of these 4 mana cost, 5 mana cost in this deck, and also 6 mana cost and 7 mana cost in the late game. And last but not the least, we have 3 tokens: a copy token, a dragon token from Dragonback Assault, and treasure token from Sarkhan is developed once you behold a dragon as he enters the battlefield. So I guess that's pretty much it for this deck. It's not quite just a maybe tier 2 or even tier 3 for this build, but as long as we have this theme that is kind of maybe favored to that of like a Dragonstorm, but Tarkir Dragonstorm would really compose most of these lineups. But basically, we still have some new ways to kind of take advantage of this in the form of these new cards from Edge of Eternities, which I think would still make this deck more efficient. So I think that's pretty much it, guys. We can call this one another of the Timur Dragon Romp deck in standard with Edge of Eternities. Don't forget to subscribe. We still have more of these, and even if you played this deck initially in your account on MTG Arena, MTG Online, just let me know in the comments as we can have a discussion on this as to what other card options are made for this kind of deck build. Again, guys, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and see you guys on the next upload.